Unveiled, 3 terrifying true stories of sinister home intrusions that will haunt you forever. The night seemed peaceful, but for Sarah, a single mother in Ohio, the silence carried a weight. After a grueling night shift as a nurse, every shadow outside felt threatening, every rustling leaf a whisper of potential danger. She sank into her couch, the warmth of home washing over her, when a faint scratching at the window shattered the stillness. Was it just the wind? Her heart raced as the sounds intensified, a chorus of shuffling footsteps and muted voices creeping from the darkness. It couldn't be real, could it? Overwhelmed by exhaustion, she dismissed her fears. The world outside was too chaotic, too dangerous. She had 2 children to protect, and this predictability was her sanctuary. As Sarah tiptoed upstairs to check on her kids, her heart pounded in her chest. They were blissfully unaware, nestled in their blankets, dreaming. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and sighed in relief. Perhaps it was just her mind playing tricks on her, a side effect of long hours at the hospital. But when she stepped back into the living room, the flickering porch light caught her attention. It danced like a warning, a broken guardian that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. With a chuckle meant to reassure herself, she turned away, heading to work again the next day. But the flicker haunted her. Days turned into a blur of exhaustion wrapped in more unsettling signs. Her neighbors' whispers about creeping dread filled the air. Home invasions were rampant, and each story clawed at her nerves. The tension tightened in her chest. They talked of locks, alarms, and a man named Frank who seemed to know every intimate detail of the neighborhood. She had known him from community events, from chats on the sidewalk while her children played. Sarah tried to convince herself that he was warm, trustworthy, but her mind wouldn't rest. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet the facade of safety slipped away when Sarah learned the truth about Frank. He was tied to the invasions, a chilling realization that sent ice through her veins. The dread gnawed at her, twisting into paranoia. Every creak, every soft thump echoed in her ears, drawing her deeper into a spiral of anxiety. By night, she transformed from a mother, a caretaker, into a watchful guardian, eyes darting and senses heightened, scrutinizing every neighbor's expression. Then, the unthinkable happened. Late one night, she saw him lurking near her property, a malevolent shadow at the edge of her sanctuary. Instinctively, she confronted him, but the smile he held was anything but friendly. He leaned in, whispering secrets that made her blood run cold. He knew her routine, the way her children slept, and his laughter sent panic screaming through her. Heart racing, she bolted inside, locking the door behind her, the sound echoing like a final barrier between her and the darkness outside. Trembling with fear in her kitchen, phone in hand, she was paralyzed by the weight of betrayal. Who could she trust? The police? Her neighbors? As shadows danced ominously across her walls and panic tightened its grip, a haunting word slithered from outside: "You can't hide forever, Sarah." And with that chilling declaration, the fight for her family's safety spiraled out of control, leaving her on the precipice of her worst nightmare. The sanctuary she'd cherished now held the seeds of her deepest fears, and as she stared into the dark, the question loomed: how long could she evade the predator that stalked her fate? The air was thick with foreboding, suffocating Sarah as she stood in her small, dimly lit kitchen. The clock ticked loudly, marking each second with the weight of her brewing dread. As if synchronized with her pulse, the shadows pulsated menacingly, creeping closer with every moment. It was as though the very walls were closing in on her, tightening their grip, urging her to confront the imminent reality she wanted to deny. She could still hear Frank's cruel laughter echoing in her ears. "You can't hide forever, Sarah." It rattled in her mind like a mocking chorus. She needed to do something. She couldn't just sit here, petrified, waiting for the inevitable. Her heart hammered as she glanced at the phone in her hand, its glow offering a weak reassurance. Could she call the police? Would they take her seriously? Would they arrive in time? Tears burned in her eyes as she fought back panic. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. She'd gather her children, get them dressed, and leave. They needed to go somewhere safe, away from this oppressive fear. She quickly dashed up the stairs, her breath quickening with each step. The door creaked loudly, seeming to groan under the weight of her dread. In their cozy rooms, both kids were fast asleep. Sarah hesitated. Breaking this precious peace felt reckless, but could she risk leaving them here? Gently, she shook her daughter's shoulder. "Emma, honey, wake up." The little girl stirred and blinked, her confusion palpable. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "Just come with me, sweetie. We need to leave the house for a bit." She knew Emma wouldn't understand, but she could see the shadows gathered at the edge of her vision, dark fingers curling around the doorframe. In that moment, her instincts screamed at her to escape. Just as she bent down to shake her son awake, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, shattering the heavy silence and sending a shock through her body. Time slowed. She instinctively grabbed Emma and whispered urgently, "Stay close to me." With trembling hands, she crept toward the hallway, heart racing like an out-of-control freight train. Each step felt agonizingly slow. The house felt alive, the walls vibrating with an anticipation that left her breathless. As they reached the top of the stairs, a low voice slithered up from the shadows below. "Sarah, I know you're up there." It was Frank. The perverse pleasure in his tone chilled her. She pressed her back against the wall, stopping every breath, willing her body to grow small and invisible. The children stayed frozen beside her, sensing the eerie tension as much as they could understand. The world outside her sanctuary was no longer a banal familiarity, it was now a den of horrors. Frank's footsteps creaked on the wooden floorboards, restless, prowling. "You can't escape me, Sarah. I'm not just going to let you run away." Her heart clenched in fear. She needed a plan. She needed an escape. There had to be a way out. Slowly, she moved her hand to point toward the attic door at the end of the hallway. It was an old entry, one that hadn't been used in years, but it might be her only chance. Keeping her voice steady, barely above a whisper, she told Emma, "We're going to the attic. Trust me." With every ounce of courage, she led her children down the hall, praying that the door wouldn't creak too loudly. As she reached for the handle, the floor beneath her groaned ominously, mirroring her apprehension. Then, just as she prepared to push the door open, a sudden crash reverberated through the house, and the lights flickered ominously. The darkness seemed to laugh, a wicked echo filled with unfathomable intent. "Let us play a game, Sarah," Frank called from below, the chill in his voice sending shivers racing down her spine. The exit was almost within her grasp, but what awaited them in the attic? As she opened the door, what secrets lay hidden in the darkness? The thrill of fear twisted her stomach, leaving her poised on the edge of an abyss. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Emma whispered, her innocent voice piercing the tension. As Sarah lingered in the doorway, dread flooding her senses, she couldn't shake the haunting echo of Frank's promise. And as she stepped into the abyss of the attic, one thought crashed through her: this was only the beginning. What hell waited inside those shadows? The attic door creaked open, and a gust of stale air rushed past Sarah, wrapping around her like icy fingers. She stepped inside, pulling Emma close while her heart raced in a frantic symphony against the eerie silence. The faint glow from the hallway faded behind her, swallowing them in darkness. "Mommy?" Her son Luke stirred softly, blinking awake. He rubbed his eyes, confusion etched on his tiny face. "What's happening?" "Shoo," Sarah hissed, holding both children tightly. The shadows loomed like hungry beasts, and she could almost feel Frank's presence seeping into the room, a malevolent weight pressing against her chest. "Look," Emma whispered, pointing into the thick gloom. A flicker of light danced in the corner. It wasn't the sun filtering through a window, but something more sinister, glinting off an old object hidden amongst the dust. Cautiously, Sarah moved forward, her breath shallow. She could hear her heartbeat, thundering in her ears like a warning. Whatever lay ahead held the potential for danger or the hope of survival. The light flickered again as she approached, revealing an antique mirror propped against the wall. Its tarnished surface glimmered with a strange allure, but there was something wrong. Something unsettling about the way it reflected the darkness. "Mommy, I don't like it," Luke whispered, clutching her leg tighter. The mirror's edges were frayed, as if it had been torn from another time, another world. As she examined it, the shadows seemed to shift and swirl within the glass, as if they were alive. Suddenly, a face emerged, a twisted, familiar visage that made her stomach churn. Sarah, the reflection beckoned, its lips forming her name with mocking clarity. It was Frank, but he seemed different in that glass, and the voice resonated with an eerie echo. "Run!" she screamed, adrenaline flooding her veins. The mirror's haunting image shattered her composure. She spun on her heel, her instincts igniting, pulling the children toward the ladder that led deeper into the attic. As they began to ascend, a loud crash from below sent a jolt through the air. It was followed by a predatory growl, a low rumble reverberating through the walls. "Sarah," a voice purred from the shadows below, echoing with a temperate chill. "I'm coming for you and your little ones know." She gasped, scrambling up the ladder, pulling Emma and Luke behind her. They clung to each other as if the very act of holding on could shield them from what lurked below. The attic was cramped and dusty, cluttered with relics from another life. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, their silken threads reflecting the light of an old bulb that flickered weakly. She could feel it, the suffocating pressure of time standing still. Suddenly, something shifted behind her. She turned to face the way they had come, every muscle tensed. A shadow slithered closer, closer, its shape indistinguishable from the outstretched darkness. "Sarah, let us go!" Emma cried. But Sarah stood paralyzed. The light from the bulb above began to flicker frantically, struggling against the dark. Then the attic door rattled violently, the sounds of Frank's fists pounding on the wood sending tremors through her bones. "Let me in, I just want to play." Fear clawed at her throat, and she turned back to the children. "We can't stay here." With shaky hands, she noticed a small window at the far end of the attic. It was old and caked with grime, but if she could break it open, they might escape. Without hesitating, she rushed toward it. The jagged glass let out a shriek of protest as she pried it open. Fresh air rushed in, a sharp contrast to the stifling dread of the attic. Just as she prepared to climb out, a dark shadow loomed behind her. "Sarah, you're not leaving that easily." There was no turning back now. "Quick, I need you both to jump," she urged, her voice tinged with desperation. But as the kids moved back toward the window, the attic door burst open with splintering force. Frank stood there, silhouetted against the dim light, laughter spilling from his lips. "Game over," he snarled, and with a final push, Sarah understood that the true horror was only beginning. What waited behind Frank's wicked smile? Would she find a way to protect her children, or would the attic become their tomb? The air grew thick with the stench of mold and despair as Frank's silhouette filled the doorway, a grotesque caricature of the man Sarah once loved. Panic surged through her like wildfire, igniting every instinct to survive. "Mommy," Luke whimpered, his small voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. She turned, urging the children toward the window, but the world outside felt impossibly distant, swallowed by night. Frank stepped closer, each movement deliberate and menacing. Shadows clung to him, twisting unnaturally as if they belonged to something other than flesh and blood. "You can't run from me, Sarah," he taunted, his voice oily and thick, oozing with the weight of their shared past. "We are forever tied. Get back!" She screamed, tension vibrating through her throat, but hesitation was already slipping into her voice, pitifully woven with memories of a life before the darkness. Suddenly, the old bulb flickered once more, illuminating the room just enough to reveal the twisted smile that curled across Frank's face. As he advanced, Sarah's thoughts raced. What if this was an illusion? What if the mirror had unleashed something more than just an apparition, but a truth she could not face? Run! She panted, pushing Emma and Luke toward the window. They stumbled, confusion battling fear in their wide eyes. There was an urgency, a desperation as she knocked over boxes in the way, searching for a path to flee, but then came the quiet. An expectant hush enveloped them, allowing the terrible weight of dread to settle like a thick fog. Sarah dared a glance back. Frank stood still, his eyes glimmering in the dim light. They were not his no, but instead, fathomless voids reflecting malice. "Don't you remember the games we played?" He murmured, each word dripping with haunting nostalgia, as if they shared a hidden bond beyond the surface. A scream clawed its way up Sarah's throat, desperate to escape. "You're not him!" she shouted, fists clenched, pulling her children close. The memory of sweet moments together felt like a sick joke now, tainted by the darkness that had consumed him. With a rush of adrenaline, she shoved her shoulder against the window frame, splintering the remaining glass. Emma and Luke hesitated, frozen in fear as they watched the encroaching shadow. "Now!" she bellowed, pushing them through the jagged opening. "Go!" Emma's small body slipped through first, followed quickly by Luke. Now it was just Sarah, heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. The freezing air met her face as she turned back one last time. Frank had moved closer, his smile unfurling like a dangerous flower blooming in the darkness. "You will always be mine." Time froze. With one last burst of determination, Sarah dove out after her children, the remnants of the attic falling behind her. The ground met her with a grim embrace, knocking the air from her lungs, but she scrambled back onto her feet. "Run! Just run!" she gasped, wrenching her gaze away from the house. Shadows danced behind the windows, an echo of Frank's twisted presence, a reminder that he was still coming. Suddenly, a sharp laughter erupted from within the house, the sound splitting the night like a dagger. It felt alive, as though the house itself was a creature, ready to swallow her whole. "Mommy! Where do we go?" Luke's voice trembled as he clung to her hand. The darkness behind them pulsed with vitality, and she realized escaping the attic had only driven them into a more terrible nightmare. She froze. Where could they find safety from something relentless, something that wouldn't let go? Uncertainty gnawed at her insides, and fear paralyzed her for a split second. Ahead, she spotted the old swing set, a remnant of happier times now shrouded in shadow. "Over there. Hide!" But just as they turned, a figure emerged from the gloom behind them, moving with an impossibly fluid grace. "Did you think you could escape so easily?" The voice sent shivers down her spine. They weren't safe yet. With time slipping away and panic rising, Sarah turned to her children once again, her heart racing. Would her love be enough to shield them from the nightmare that was closing in, or was this only the beginning of their horror? The moment froze as the figure stepped into the faint light, revealing the unmistakable outline of Frank. But something was off. His features were sharper, the skin stretched tight across his bones, like a puppet whose strings had nearly snapped. The swing set creaked ominously, echoing the heaviness in Sarah's chest. "Mommy!" Luke cried, pulling at her sleeve, his eyes wide with terror. She could feel his small body trembling against her side. Panic flared within her, igniting the primal urge to protect her children at all costs. "Stay behind me!" she hissed, her voice low but filled with urgency. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, but terror had rendered her paralyzed. "What wouldn't you give to stay forever?" Frank's voice slithered through the air, its tone sickly sweet, like honey laced with poison. Even as her heart stuttered in fear, she couldn't shake the illusion that perhaps this was all some dreadful nightmare where she might awaken and find herself safe. Then, without warning, Frank lunged forward, shadows morphing around him in a deadly swirl. Sarah yanked Luke and Emma toward the dense woods at the edge of their yard. She could hear the dry leaves crackle underfoot, a cacophony beneath the suffocating silence. The gust of cold air wrapped around them like icy fingers, threatening to pull her back. "No!" she shouted, refusing to succumb to despair. She darted ahead, fear stealing her resolve. "Keep going," she urged her children, both of whom seemed to hesitate, fighting against their own paralysis, but Frank was faster. A dreadful rattle erupted from his throat, growing into laughter that echoed like thunder through the cold night. "You think you can hide from your own shadow?" Just as she neared the trees, Sarah heard the unmistakable crack of a branch snapping behind them. Her heart raced, pounding in sync with the terror that painted the edges of her vision. "Run!" she screamed again. Dread clawed at her throat. She could almost feel Frank's hot breath against her neck, his presence a looming cloud threatening to envelop them. They plunged into the underbrush, obscured by thick foliage. The world melded into an unfocused blur of chaotic shadows and muffled cries. "Don't look back. Keep moving," she warned, her voice barely breaking the tension that filled the night air. The branches snagged at Sarah's clothes, tearing them like they were alive, a chilling reminder that nature itself could conspire against her. She pushed forward, adrenaline coursing through her veins, but the laughter it stretched and echoed through the trees, warping reality. "I'll find you," Sarah came Frank's taunt, warped and unheard, reverberating from every corner of the woods. Each word wrapped around her heart, squeezing it tighter. "Mommy!" Emma whimpered, tears glistening in her frightened eyes. "Just a little further," she coaxed, though her own resolve was waning. They stumbled into a clearing, moonlight spilling eerie silver across the ground. The familiarity of the spot struck her with a shock, a place they once played, once laughed. But now it felt like a graveyard, haunted by remnants of joy long since buried. "Where do we go now?" Luke asked, his voice barely a whisper, trembling through the air like a fragile note on the wind. Before she could answer, a rustling sound broke the stillness, and the shadows shifted again. A dark figure emerged, creeping into the light, different from Frank, but still a nightmare made flesh. "Sarah, isn't it?" a soft voice sang, drawing closer. "Why didn't you say hello?" Her breath caught in her throat cold, as she turned to face whatever grotesque vision now haunted them. This horror was layered, a tapestry of fear unveiling itself like a cruel surprise. She realized they were not just hunted by Frank. "Watch out!" she screamed, realizing too late that this nightmare had only just begun. The darkness thickened around them, closing in as fear surged anew. Just how many demons haunted this night? And then the whispers began, faint, insidious, echoing in the trees. "You can't escape, you belong here." Was every corner of their lives tainted? What if, in this moment of fraying hope, she found there was nowhere left to run? The figure stepped into the clearing, its posture smooth yet unnatural, like a marionette held by invisible strings. Sarah's heart raced, the pulsating dread threatening to burst her chest open. This was no dream, it felt far too real. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah." The voice caressed her ears, honeyed but laced with venom. Shadowy features twisted into a smile as the figure drew closer, its origins obscured by darkness. It was a woman, well, a thing that called itself a woman. Her hair dripped with an unearthly slickness, glistening as if caught in eternal rain. "We've been waiting for you. You've been summoned," she continued, stepping into the pale moonlight. Her eyes were hollow, voids of black that threatened to draw Sarah in. A chill crept down Sarah's spine. "Get back!" Sarah shouted, clutching Luke and Emma tightly. They flinched, their small arms wrapping around her waist, desperate for protection. The woman's laughter was sickly sweet, resonating in the air like a melancholic tune. "Ah, but you're already part of us. One way or another, you'll fit right in." Sarah felt the weight of her choices pressing in, the terror palpable as the shadows morphed around them. She could see more movement. The trees, once guardians, now felt like conspirators. "Stay close," she urged. The children clung to her, trembling in fear. "No!" shouted the twisted woman. "You'll ruin the game. It's not just you they want." "Who? What do you want?" Sarah's voice wavered as questions spun through her mind, each one more frantic than the last. "There are many wandering souls," the woman said with a sickening smile. "And they sense your fear. They thrive on it, just as we do." "Terror breeds terrors," came a voice from the shadows behind, thick with malice. Sarah turned, feeling the cold shivers race down her back. Figures emerged, their faces distorted by darkness-lost souls, each bearing a resemblance of familiar horror, echoing memories she wished to forget. "Run!" she screamed, turning back into the shadows of the woods, urging her children to sprint. The laughter grew louder, resonating in a chilling harmony. "You can't run from yourself," the woman taunted, her voice wrapping around them like a noose. Each step through the underbrush felt heavier, as if the ground itself conspired to keep them from escaping. Twisting vines reached out, snagging at their clothes, seeming to pull as if they had a life of their own. "Mommy, I can't go," Emma cried, her small legs stumbling. "Just a bit further," Sarah urged, fear coursing through her. Panic transformed her words into raw desperation. The whispers in the trees grew louder, overlapping. "You will join us. You belong here." Sweat trickled down her back as the shadows closed in, invading her mind with visions of what could be. She could picture herself bound, lost forever in the arms of the darkness, living a dread-infused existence, laughing madly amongst shattered hopes. And in a fleeting moment, Sarah gasped. What if they didn't need to run? What if survival meant joining the darkness? "Mommy! Help!" Luke's voice pierced through her thoughts, dragging her back to the moment. It snapped the spell. "No! We are leaving!" She yelled fiercely, a protective fire igniting within her. There was no way she would let the darkness consume them. She pushed them forward, bursting through the last line of foliage. Suddenly, they emerged back into the world, disoriented and gasping. The yard was still, almost serene, yet the shadows hummed with voices, reverberating in the air. But they weren't safe yet. Unspeakable dread crept into their hearts, for the haunting laughter continued, echoing across the distance. "Welcome back, dears." Frank's voice drifted through the night, a sinister invitation chilling her to the bone. Was this just the beginning? And what awaited them in the quiet of their own home? Adrenaline surged through Sarah as she raced toward the house, the echo of Frank's voice spinning a noose around her throat. Each step echoed painfully, a reminder of their closeness to a nightmare not yet behind them. "Mommy, we need to go to the car," Luke cried, eyes wide with panic, glancing back over his shoulder, as if expecting the twisted woman to emerge from the shadows and snatch them away. "No, we can't leave yet. We have to get inside." Sarah gasped, her breath burning in her lungs. The door loomed ahead, a wooden barrier between them and the horrors outside. She fumbled for the doorknob, her hands trembling, slick with sweat. As she twisted it, a sudden chill swept over her, wrapping her like a shroud. The door creaked open, revealing the familiar living room, but shadows danced along the walls, twisting and curling like living things. The laughter from the yard surged, infiltrating the thresholds like a swarm of locusts. "Mommy, please!" Emma whimpered, her voice cracking. Just a little longer," Sarah promised, ushering them inside. She slammed the door shut, each heartbeat a drum in her ears. Inside, their once safe haven now felt suffocating. The walls whispered secrets, sighs of the long-forgotten. The furniture, a couch, a coffee table, seemed foreign, as if the shadows had leached onto everything they once held dear. "Turn on the lights," Luke shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Sarah rushed to flick the switch, and the living room illuminated with a harsh fluorescence, scarring the darkness retreating into corners. A momentary relief washed over her. But as she turned back to her children, she realized it was too quiet. "Where's Emma?" Panic gripped her stomach like iron. "Over there," Luke yelled, pointing to the hallway. Sarah's heart dropped as she saw Emma standing completely still, staring into the abyss of the narrow passage. A heavy silence lay thick in the air, cloaking every corner. "Emma!" she called, her feet carrying her closer, but something in the air shifted. There was something wrong about her daughter's stance, the slight tilt of her head, as if some invisible entity held her in thrall. The air crackled with electricity, and for an instant, Sarah thought she heard whispers, children's voices, playful yet taunting. A shudder raced through her. "Get back here!" she barked, her voice cracking under the weight of dread. At the sound of her voice, Emma jolted, her eyes wide and wild. She turned and bolted toward Sarah, but something flickered behind her, slipping through her grasp an ethereal wisp of darkness, its shape vaguely human. "Don't let her touch you!" Luke shouted, his little fists clenching at his sides. As Emma reached her, Sarah grabbed her tight, making sure the shadow didn't reach her. With every fleeting second, the whispers intensified, drowning out her thoughts. They beckoned with an urgency that clawed at the back of her mind. "Mommy, I can't hear you," Emma shouted, but Sarah struggled to find words, her heart pounding with the realization creeping in, the shadows wanted them. With a sudden fierceness, she rushed to the living room, pulling Emma back and shoving Luke against the kitchen counter. "We have to hold on tight. Stay in this moment. Don't let them take you." Fragments of familiarity clashed with the growing dread engulfing them as the lights began flickering, fading into sporadic bursts of darkness. The temperature dropped, and Sarah could see their breath, swirling wisps of fear hanging in the air. "Mommy," Emma's voice trembled. Reality twisted and turned around them, their breaths heavy and labored. What once felt like their home now loomed as a battleground, and an unnatural force pressed against the walls. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah spotted movement, the dining room chair sliding silently across the floor as if pushed by unseen hands. She felt a surge of terror clawing at her throat. "It's not over," Luke whispered, eyes darting to the front door. "They didn't go away." A cold shiver raced down Sarah's spine. The laughter from outside morphed into a cacophony of voices. "Let us in, let us play." She pressed her back against the wall, heart racing, aware that this was only the beginning. What shadows awaited them beyond those walls? What if the very darkness they feared had already seeped into their lives, ready to strike when they least expected it? And as fear clung to their skin, Sarah realized the game was only just starting. The walls shuddered as the voices echoed, blurring the line between nightmare and reality. "Let us in, let us play." The chant pierced Sarah's mind like shards of glass, each repetition a reminder that whatever was outside hungered for them. "Mom! What do we do?" Luke's voice quivered, a mixture of desperation and innocence that sunk deeper than any fear. His eyes darted around the room as if a way out, a solution, lay hidden in the shadows. Frantically, Sarah scanned the living room, feeling the oppressive weight of dread pressing in on all sides. She turned her gaze back to Emma, who clung to her, wide eyes reflecting pure terror. "We need to stay together," she said, her voice barely a whisper, knowing that the moment they faltered could spell their doom. The lights flickered again, and for a brief moment, they dimmed so low, the shadows appeared to breathe. A fleeting silhouette danced just beyond the reach of the light, melding into the walls. "Mommy!" Emma squeaked, as if the figure had pulled her attention involuntarily. Sarah shook her head, forcing her eyes away. They couldn't afford any distractions. "Into the kitchen!" Sarah commanded, her heart pounding so loudly she feared they could all hear it. As they stumbled toward the kitchen, she took a quick glance back at the living room, now filled with a palpable dread. The shadows felt alive, shifting and swirling in an almost chaotic ballet. They hurried through the doorway, and once inside, Sarah slammed the door behind them. "Lock it!" she yelled, pain breaking through the panic. Luke fumbled at the latch with trembling fingers, embarrassment piercing through his fear. "Don't let them in." "Whatever you do," Sarah urged, kneeling down to tighten the grip around Emma's shoulders, feeling the warmth of her body against her own. A crashing sound echoed from the living room, a jarring thud that thundered against the walls, followed by a chorus of giggles that made Sarah's skin crawl. It was unnerving, the way laughter felt like a taunt now mocking their every attempt to resist. "What if they find a way in?" Luke murmured, his voice shaking. "What if they already have?" Sarah bit her lip, the truth stinging her cheeks. "We can't think like that. We have to hold on." But the words felt weak, the fight draining from her, swallowed by the darkness gathering around them. Then, Emma gasped, drawing attention back to the kitchen. Sarah shifted slightly, and there she saw it, a shadow creeping along the floor from beneath the cabinets. It was thick and black, almost liquid, looping and curling towards them. "Mommy!" Emma cried, pushing away from Sarah with wide, frantic eyes. "It's coming!" In that moment, time slowed. 3 hearts drummed a frantic beat together as the dread crawled up Sarah's spine, her instincts screaming to flee, yet her body felt paralyzed. She moved instinctively, reaching out to grab Emma's arm before she could drift toward the waiting darkness. The shadow slithered closer, pulsing and flickering under the dim light. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed a nearby knife from the countertop, its metallic sheen reflecting a sliver of determination. "Stay back!" she shouted, raising the weapon as if it could repel the darkness. The shadow hesitated, then surged forward with a sudden rush, as if sensing their fear. Sarah tightened her grip, ready to fight, knowing they were dangerously outmatched. "What do we do?" Luke shouted, panic rising in his voice as he backed into the corner. Just then, the kitchen lights flickered again, and with that flicker, the shadow stopped as if caught in a moment of indecision. "It can sense our fear," Sarah thought, heart racing. They had to find out. This was a dark game, and they were players whether they liked it or not. "What if we don't fear it?" she muttered, disbelief creeping into her chest. The kitchen door rattled violently, shaking the frame. "Let us in." The voices echoed, a chorus of insidious glee. But as the shadow hesitated, could it be a chance? Could overcoming their fear be the key to their survival? In the back of Sarah's mind, a chilling thought settled. Their lives hung in the balance, and the next moment could either bring them freedom or seal their fate. Could the answer to their survival lie in embracing the very thing they feared? "Mommy, please!" Emma's voice pierced through the thickening atmosphere, desperation wrapping around the syllables like a vice. Sarah's own heart threatened to burst as she faced the creeping darkness. The shadow danced closer, swirling like smoke, the air around it growing colder. It felt alive, an entity that fed off their terror. Nothing about this felt right. "Stay back!" she shouted again, her voice shaking yet firm as she aimed the knife towards the dark. Luke's trembling hand found Sarah's, their small connection anchored in that panicked abyss. "What if it gets us?" he whispered, eyes wide with the kind of fear that chills you to your core. "It won't," she snapped, trying to infuse her voice with whatever bravery she could muster. But inside, she felt the ice of doubt seeping into her bones. The walls felt like they were closing in, each second dragging on relentlessly, amplifying their dread. Then it happened. A soft sound, like whispers, slithered around them. "Let us play." The voices turned from giggles into a sinister chant, a dark lullaby that enveloped the kitchen. It was mocking them, teasing their vulnerabilities. "Make it stop!" Emma wailed, inching closer to Sarah, the need for safety betraying her fear. In that moment, Sarah realized it wasn't just fear they were fighting. This was a battle of wills, a war against whatever lay waiting at their door. Listen to me, both of you, she said, her voice trembling but commanding. We're going to face this together. We're stronger than it thinks. The laughter intensified, echoing like a cruel symphony. The shadow paused again as if amused by their defiance, yet Sarah could see its shifting form throbbing with a malevolent hunger. Mom, what if Luke started, but Sarah cut him off. No, Luke. We can't let it get inside our heads. She glanced around the cramped kitchen, something catching her eye, the old wooden cabinet creaking ever so slightly, memories of her grandmother's stories surfacing unbidden, stories about spirits being drawn to fear, and how unyielding bravery could push them back. What if courage is the answer? Sarah found herself proposing, almost surprised by the thought. If we show it we're not afraid, can it still hurt us? The shadow swirled, growing more agitated, and Sarah pressed on. Together, we have to focus. We need to show it we're not scared. She drew a shaky breath, holding both children's hands tightly. On the count of 3, we shout. Loud, with all our might. What if that makes it worse? Luke questioned, glancing back at the rattling door. Then at least we'll go down fighting, Sarah breathed, her own fear lifting just slightly as she filled up with purpose. 1, 2, 3. They shouted in unison, we are not afraid. The sound erupted from the kitchen, ricocheting off the walls. The shadow hesitated, trembled, flickering like an old film reel, momentarily unraveling under the force of their defiance, but the relief was short-lived. In an instant, the entity surged forward, cloaked in fury. The kitchen light sparked, flickering violently before plunging into darkness. They were engulfed in shadows now, the air thick with tension, a heavy silence replacing the chaos. Mommy! Emma gasped, clinging tighter to Sarah, desperate. Sarah swung the knife, her instincts taking over. Stay with me! She cried out, panic gripping her throat. The knife felt like a feather against the oppressive force closing in, extinguishing any flicker of hope, and then, from within the suffocating blackness, emerged a distorted face, a visage twisted and grotesque, eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. You cannot escape, it whispered, its voice a mixture of velvet and venom, each word sinking deep into their hearts. As the children screamed, Sarah faced the horror, realization crashing down on her. They had entered a nightmare realm, and whatever this thing was, it was just getting started, and that's when she felt it. A burning, scalding pain shot through her hand, where the knife brushed against her skin. It wasn't just the shadow that craved fear, it could draw power from pain, too. Let go! She shouted, determination fueling her. But could she hold on long enough to protect her children from the abyss? As darkness swirled around them, Sarah's resolve began to crack. Could she truly withstand the entity's grasp? Or would her own fear lead them to their end? The walls seemed to breathe as shadows danced, transforming the kitchen into a vortex of despair. Together, we must fight, whispered a voice within her. The question echoed, how much pain could one endure before it broke them completely? In that moment of despair, as the grotesque shadow lunged closer, something shifted within Sarah. The fight within her ignited, the love for her children rekindled the warmth that threatened to dim. No! You will not take my children! She cried out, channeling every ounce of strength into those words. The very act of defiance shocked the shadows, a ripple of energy coursing through the oppressive gloom. Together, she gathered Emma and Luke, their tiny hands clasped tightly in hers. Listen to me, we are stronger together. We won't let it win. She felt a flicker of hope break through the paralyzing dread that had wrapped itself around her heart like a vice. Louder! We can't just shout it. We must believe it. Sarah commanded, the tremor of fear still evident but now tempered with rage and protection. 1, 2, 3. We not afraid. Their voices echoed off the kitchen walls, a thunderous declaration that surged against the swirling shadows. Suddenly, the intangible figure paused, its twisted expression faltering. It hesitated, as if struggling against an unseen barrier forming around them. But Sarah felt it, a surge of light ignited within her, blossoming into a radiant shield. "Feel the light!" she shouted, desperation mixing with determination. "Embrace the light." In that moment, she realized they were not just afraid, they had the power to manifest something beyond fear. It was their unified love that could banish the darkness encroaching around them. With every pulse of that light, the shadows wrinkled and recoiled, the malevolence swirling in on itself, drawn back into the abyss from which it came. "You don't belong here," Sarah proclaimed, feeling the warmth course through her arm where the knife had been, no longer a weapon, but a symbol of her will. The figure screamed a ghastly wail that felt like ice scraping against bone. As Sarah and her children stood firm, the darkness began to unravel, fraying at the edges like a thread pulled too tightly. The cacophony of dreadful laughter morphed into whimpers, echoing away from them, leaving the room vibrating with residual tension. "Stay close," she urged, pulling them away from the last vestiges of the shadow. With each step, the kitchen transformed, the shadows retreating, becoming mere wisps of fear out of sight and out of mind. The room brightened, sunlight breaking through the old windows, flooding the space with warmth. "We did it, Mommy!" Luke exclaimed, his face radiant with awe, the innocence of childhood returning as terror lifted. Sarah knelt down, enveloping them both in her arms, grounding them in that moment, reveling in their safety, but as the warmth enveloped them, Sarah knew this was not the end. Frank's insidious presence still lingered, a specter not easily dismissed. She glanced around, seeking the truth concealed in the morning light flooding their home. The darkness had been stalled but not extinguished. "Let us go outside," she suggested quietly, her heart pounding. "We need to face our fears together." The two children nodded, the bond among them forged through the night's terrors and triumphs. Once outside, the fresh dawn bathed their faces in soft light, yet shadows still lingered just beyond the trees. She could almost feel Frank watching, his malicious gaze heavy and dark, all too familiar. "Mommy, what if he comes back?" Emma asked, her tone a mix of fear and wonder. "If he does," Sarah replied, "we will remember this moment. We stood together, we fought and won." Her resolve hardened, turning to steel. "Together," Luke echoed, squeezing Emma's hand tight. "Together," Sarah affirmed, knowing the fight was far from over. But now, they had the strength to confront it, they had each other, the light of their love illuminating the uncertain path ahead. As they stepped away from the confines of their home, shadows melted away behind them, defeated for now. And while the weight of the past would always lurk, today heralded a dawn of resilience. They were alive, and no darkness could take that away. The uncertainty ahead still loomed, but heartened by their bond, Sarah knew they could face whatever came next. With the sun risen behind them, they ventured forth, each step a testament to survival. This was not just the end of a nightmare, but the beginning of a renewed life, stronger, braver, and ready to reclaim everything Frank had tried to take. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe immediately so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to help us feed the algorithm. We want to hear from you. Flood that comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this epic finale. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.